Hello, everybody. This is John Browning with the Building Your Life podcast. We're back again this week with a special guest, Tina Larsson from the Folsom Group. And Tina, it's wonderful to have you with us. You have a book out, Living the High Life, which kind of corresponds with the book Building Your Life, kind of the same, a lot of the same concepts in there. We're going to talk a little bit about that. Both of us kind of grew up, so to speak, on Wall Street. And I want to hear about your story. I know my story, and many of my listeners know my story, but we'll kind of compare and contrast that and kind of walk through our paths and then talk about a little bit about what you do there with the Folsom Group now, which is really quite a bit different than Wall Street. And we'll talk about why you do that as well. So before we get started, Tina, tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us why you wrote the book, Living the High Life, and a little bit about that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, John, for having me. It's very exciting. And it is fun that we both have living the high life and building your life. And one of the many commonalities. Yes, I come from Wall Street. Originally I come from Sweden, actually. And then I moved to New York, worked on Wall Street. And in that, my husband and I, he is also on Wall Street, and you'll hear a lot about him. And we bought a co-op. And in New York, it's called a co-op or a condo. In Florida, it's called a condo or an HOA. In other parts of the world, it might be called something else. But it's basically, if you own an apartment, then you live in a co-op or in some kind of community association. We bought a co-op, and after a few years of living there, we're business people, and we realized we went like, they're not doing a very good job, the board.
Imagine that. I'm sure nobody in the podcast has ever experienced an HOA or a co-op not doing a great job. Or maybe they can identify with what you went through.
Yes. and so in case you don't, any of our listeners don't know how it works. So if you buy into some kind of community association, what happens is that you select 5 to 10 people, and then they're basically like their own little government, and they then make decisions on the behalf of the entire community. So our board, we felt that they were not doing a good job. So therefore we spoke with some of our neighbors, and we organized a coup. And we took over the board. And
wear a pirate hat or like a patch over one eye. And yeah, okay.
Yeah, and we were lobbying. I mean, we were literally lobbying. We were standing down in the lobby getting people's signatures. That's
literally
how we did
lobbying.
It.
Yeah. Okay.
And then because of my analytical background, the new board asked me, so I'm not on the board. My husband is on the board. He's been a board president now for 13 years. And the new board asked me to dig into the financial, into the expenses. So
right. Given your background, yeah, makes sense.
Analyst, what makes sense, what doesn't make sense. Think about it. You look at one financial statement in insulation, and you have no idea what's going on, right? You, as a Wall Streeter, know that you have to compare it to something else. You can't just say McDonald's is expensive because this is their income or whatever, and this is their stock price. You have to compare it to Burger King and Wendy's, and yeah.
Yep.
So, and I used exactly that same expertise, and we were able to save our building $340,000.
Wow. And how big is your building? Just to give people an idea, like how many people?
170 apartments. So approximately 230 or people who live there. Yeah.
So a lot of money was saved. That's a lot per household.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that was only in the first 3 years. It's millions by now, but we lost count.
Right. Yeah, because that accrues over time.
Yeah. Yeah. Just like compounding, right?
Mm-hmm. That's right.
But in that, when I was out networking, instead of introducing myself as a financial advisor, I don't know about in Florida, but in New York, there are a few of us, right?
Couple. There's a couple.
Yes. Yeah. Couple.
So that is what the Folsom group, you and your husband really do, is you help other co-ops, HOAs, whatever. You help them manage things better, analyze their finances, make sure that they are set up in case there are emergency situations, I'm assuming, minimize the assessments. You probably can't eliminate those, but maybe you can minimize, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So this is 11 years ago. So we are turning 11 years in this February.
Okay.
But then for 10 years, we have been proactively helping boards to get ahead of the game. Instead of only taking care of emergencies, we help them operate proactively, like you would operate when you operate a business, right? You're
Right.
proactive. But there are certain limitations. So they don't have time, they have a full-time job, this is a volunteer position, and buildings are often old, and there are so many emergencies. Then I never thought about writing a book. Someone told me, oh, you should write a book about all your stories and all your success stories and your own story and incorporate your client stories, etc. And I didn't really think about it until the collapse of the condo in Surfside, Florida.
Mm-hmm. Right. That has caused, by the way, a lot of excess assessments here in Florida, where I'm located. And what happened is any structure, community structure over, I believe it was two or three, I think 3 stories, had to be inspected. And of course, they're looking very hard to find something, and they often do. And then whatever they find has to be fixed in a certain number of days. And a lot of folks that purchased those condos or apartments were found that they were kind of priced out of the market. They just could not afford. Some of these assessments were massive. They were like 50, $100,000, and you could finance it, but if you were already financing the purchase of your condo, that made it really, really difficult down here. And then if you were in the market to purchase something like that, well, that might actually be good news for you, because those condos have kind of gone on a fire sale because of that. So it's really interesting that you, way up north, kind of use that as the impetus to say, hey, I'm going to write this book. So tell me a little bit about the book. Like what are the topics that are covered, and why did you
Yeah.
write? You wrote it because of that, right? But there's more to that, though. There's more to that. Like, why did that prompt you to write the book? Why was it important that you get the word out on this?
So that's a great question. And so what really happened was that is the ultimate worst case scenario, right?
Yeah, I would say. Yeah,
Yes.
that definitely.
And it could have been prevented with proper proactive, if they had, I don't know that it could have been prevented, but most likely it could have been prevented if they were operating in a proactive mode and doing the repairs as they needed to be repaired, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
So we're always big proponents of, you need to get ahead of the game. You need to take care of things before they fall apart. You can't wait until the roof falls in until you fix it. You need to repair the roof if it needs structural enhancement. And that comes with assessing owners, but how else are you going to fund it, right? So you have a choice. You can borrow, or you can impose assessments to owners, and then they have to decide if they have the money and can pay for it, or if they need to borrow, right? So the whole premise of the book is to be a guidebook for every single co-op and condo or HOA owner, someone who lives in a community association. It can be, it's best practices. It's a guidebook. And it's for owners to understand the difficulties that the board has to make on your behalf. And it's also for board to act. There's lots of tools and a workbook. There's a workbook for the entire template of best practices to use that you could just copy and paste and
Steal your homework.
Yes. So there's
all that. Yeah. I
checklist.
love that. That's great. Yeah. And but it's really an expensive book, right? It probably costs a few $1,000 to buy this book, right?
Yes, it's absolutely. send me several $1,000s. No, it's available on Amazon.
Okay.
Yes, Kindle or soft copy, and if you want to ship to you, it's $19.95, and you can put it on your desk, or Kindle works too. See, and I can't remember what the Kindle is. It's probably $9.95 or something.
Yeah, it's cheaper than that. So what you're telling me is there's a potential that you could save yourself hundreds of thousands of dollars, or save your building and all those around you hundreds of thousands of dollars for $19-20.
Yeah. And that's correct. So that's where it's available, but it's really intended for owners to understand boards and for boards to get better guidance of these are best practices. This is how it's done. You should sign. Very often we work with boards where we say, do you have code of conducts and code of ethics? And you, John, and me from a finance background, we know that we have to sign those every single year.
Yes. Right.
If any of your audience is or listening to this, if you start working at a corporation, you need to sign code of ethics and code of conduct at least when you're hired, and in many cases every single year. Boards often don't even have that. And we're like, well, why don't you?
Right. Yeah.
I mean,
it's and it's just like, I can think of this if I am like the head of a condo association or just even a member, like I might want to go out and buy a bunch of these books, because there's two sides to the story, right? You've got the people who are trying to run it, and you hope they're not, for lack of a better term, jerks, right? That really do have the best interests of everybody in mind. But then you also have the owners, and maybe they're on the middle floor. I don't care about the roof. Well, you might if it gets bad and the people above you start leaking and it keeps on going down, right? These are shared spaces. And the roof is just one frankly small part of what it takes to keep a building together and running well. But I'm, again, just guessing, but you tell me if this is kind of a correct statement, and maybe you got a story you can share with us. But if I'm the operator of a building, what incentive do I have other than doing my day-to-day job to really make sure that it's, because I'm not the owner, right? I'm just the operator on behalf of the HOA. I don't want to ruffle any feathers. I want everybody to be happy. And if I say it needs an assessment, people might be mad at me. How does all this work? It's not just about, yes, I got to do this, but how do you get everybody to work together? And do you address some of that in the book?
And that's a great question. And it is a conundrum. So think about it. So you have this community, which is similar to any other community. You select 5 to 10 people to be on the board to act on your behalf. They're the ones who make the decisions. And then that entity, so that group of people, the board members, they hire a property manager. It might be inherited, but they hire a property manager. They work with a property manager. They direct the property manager to act on the decision, to implement the decisions that the board has decided on, right? And then the property manager, he or she, they report to their firm, which is a third-party firm, so they're an agent of. But they are, as you said, a third-party manager. they are, so let's say that their total fee for your building is $100,000 a year. They don't get any extra money they don't have an extra incentive to do more work for you.
Right.
So, well, in some cases they do have extra fees for certain things, but in general, so they're going to make their $100,000 whether they do extra work or not. And then they have complaints from owners who are complaining about them. And then they have complaints because now they're going to be assessed $100,000 each. And they're like, so they're all up in arms. They don't want to be assessed, right? So it's really it's a very complicated team to manage. And that's kind of where we come in to be their quarterback, to make sure that we're all on the same page, moving things along and doing the right things and advising in the right way. I mean, if the board is saying to the property manager, we're not paying this much for this, what is the property manager going to do? He or she cannot convince anyone because he's not the decision maker.
Right.
So it's kind of, I mean, if I'm working for someone and they said, no, we're absolutely not doing that. Okay, I mean, I was hired, I'm going to do what you tell us to do. So it's complex.
Yes, it's complex. Like with a lot of businesses, and Wall Street was that way. Or you remember that you're working for a big corporation, and somebody up at the top says to do something, you may know it's not feasible or something more than they do, but if they just decide, no, this is the way it's going to be, then you got to figure out a way to get that message to them without getting fired and without losing your bonus and
Yes.
that type of thing. And it's every, I guess it's no different than any big organization. The difference is that I just imagine you have many disparate points of view when you have that many people, but they all have shared resources. And maybe is that part of the thing too, as people move in and out, you make sure that, hey, very clear cut in bold, here are the things that go on and what you need to be aware of and all that. Make sure the communication's good up front. That's got to be a important one as well.
Definitely, communication is so important, and it's very difficult because, again, the board is a volunteer. The board members are volunteers. They don't have time to spend a lot of extra time or energy on this. They're busy. And then they ask the property manager to act on certain things. The property manager is not going to say, you know what, based on this conversation, should we send out the memo? Some cases they do, of course. Sometimes they have no choice. But for them to send out extra memos, it's a lot of work for them. So the communication tend to be, it could be improved.
It could be improved. Yes. Right. In most cases.
And I actually have a funny story. So we had, and it's not uncommon. We had this one board member, or we had this one owner who said, communication is terrible. And so I'm going to run for the board. I'm going to be on the board because I want to improve communication.
Yes.
So she joined the board and they said, okay, you're heading the newsletter. Send it out. And you're responsible for sending out the communication with shareholders or owners and all the newsletters. She was there for 2 years and then she resigned because it was too much work. She sent out one newsletter.
I hear these stories on a pretty regular basis. Hey, I could do better until you actually have to execute on that, right?
Exactly. But the good part is that she's now now the board doesn't have to feel that she's not going to complain about it again because now she
right.
tried it and it didn't work. And yeah.
Took a year or two, but sometimes you have to be patient, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
So, yeah, no. So if you own a co-op or condo, or if you're thinking about buying in an HOA, it doesn't matter where it is. My book is actually, even though it talks mostly about apartment buildings,
Mhm.
it's really very useful for anyone who lives in an HOA. So even if you live in a gated community in LA or in Florida, it's still there's a lot of applicable stories and relatable
Right.
tools. Yeah.
Yeah, I imagine like an HOA was something new to me when I moved down to Florida. I was like, I'm not sure exactly what that is. I mean, we kind of had one when I was living in outside of Chicago, but it wasn't a gated community. It was just sort of community rules, that type of thing. No major issues, not a lot of shared spaces, just a few. When I got down to Florida, this is a whole thing. And it's actually a bit difficult to find any community that does not have an HOA. And where we live right now, I think the HOA does a great job and the neighbors are fantastic and everything else. But I hear all the time the horror stories from both sides, right? From the HOA that's trying to do the right thing, and from the residents that are getting these crazy notices about the color of their mailbox or whatever it might be. And so what's if you, having done this for 11 years, which is quite a while, by the way, that's impressive to be, first of all, for any business to survive 11 years, says there must be a need and that you must be very good at it. So congratulations on 11 years.
Thank
um,
you.
but what is the most important thing that you would say, if you needed to really narrow it down? What's the most important thing if you're looking to purchase in an HOA, the questions that you should ask, not just an HOA, but condo, HOA, whatever? What's the most important question that you should get an answer to before you write that check and sign those mortgage papers?
That's a good question. And the one question that I would recommend is twofold.
Of course.
I would ask the HOA board, who is typically the ones, they typically have an
Approval process or something.
they have an approval process, but they typically have an interview with the candidates before they actually approve them. And in that's where you get to ask some questions. And I would ask if what they're doing to proactively maintaining the building, and also what they're doing to create a community for their community. So very often the board wants to do their own thing and they don't want to be part of the community. So they're kind of like over here and the rest of them are here. And we always find that communities that are truly communities, and there's engagement, newsletters, maybe parties or barbecue in your area, and in my area it's lobby parties, that becomes a more like a home as opposed to just apartments or just houses.
Right. Okay. I like that. I like that idea. So now the other side. I'm on the HOA board, or I'm affiliated with it. Maybe I'm a property manager, something like that. As I see people coming into the community, what would be the most important question that you would want to know about somebody coming into the building or the community?
So it depends.
Mm-hmm.
But if the building is old, there was a huge building boom in New York after the war until the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
So those buildings are old. So if those apartments have not been renovated, and the board typically knows that this was an original buyer, they bought this apartment in 1980s and they have never renovated it, then most real estate brokers are telling all their buyers when they're representing them, and they're telling them, don't tell the board that you want to renovate. in my opinion, because they think that boards don't want people who are renovating. In my opinion, you want people to upgrade. For number one, you want people to be happy where they live, right?
Mm-hmm.
Number two, you want people to renovate, because if they renovate, then the prices, there's more on an upside of the prices of all the other apartments in the same building. So you want them to be able to upgrade. So that would be my number one advice. The board also knows that if they're buying from this owner who just sold, who renovated 2 years ago, that might not be a question.
Right. All right. So this really does dovetail quite a bit with building your life using the tool that we call money, because where you live and the roof over your head, but not just the roof over your head, your community of which you're a part, is really a big and important part of whether or not you are living happy as opposed to living miserably. And so I really like the fact that you came on the podcast today, and it's something a little bit different from what we typically discuss. We're typically talking about, how to arrange the money problem and how to solve the money problem and how to make it not a problem. But we also talk about how do you build your best life using the tool that we call money. So if you're headed into maybe a purchase decision and you don't know those questions to ask, maybe they should get your book for that reason, because maybe you've never lived in that type of situation before and you don't want to get into a situation where you're actually miserable where you live. And that's not building your best life. Or on the flip side, if you're struggling with your current situation, maybe there's a way that you could be the solution to that. Maybe that's another good reason. And we will put the link to the Amazon where they can pick up your book. And other than that, what's the best way to reach out to you?
So the best way to reach out to me is through our website. It's www.thefolsomgroup.com. You can book a time to speak with us. You can sign up for a newsletter. We send up newsletters once a month where we have lots of top tips for co-op and condo owners, buyers, and board members. And
That's valuable. Okay. Awesome. So again, thanks so much for being on the podcast today. And those of you who are regular watchers of the Building Your Life podcast, you already know the best way to get a hold of me is to go out to our website at guardianrockwealth.com, or you can grab your cell phone. I'm going to wait for a second while you grab your cell phone. All right, everybody's got it. Now text 321-421-5213, the word life, and you get all of our links, all of our free information. If you like what you see, if you're interested, then we are accepting clients across the United States. And yes, we do love Floridians. So we do have a concentration of clients down here in Florida, but we also have clients in Hawaii and all the way up to Maine and everywhere in between. So Tina, is there one thing that you want to leave our audience with today before we sign off?
Yes, reducing expenses and improving your building increases your property value. So if you are in a co-op or condo, reach out to me and I will be happy to discuss that with you.
And that's almost the case with most businesses and your personal finances as well. If you can find ways to reduce expenses while still maintaining the value, and you typically don't know this until you actually look and do a little analysis, which is what you've done for the past 11 years in this space. So you definitely want to reach out to Tina. All right. Well, thank you again for being with us, and we will see everybody next time on the Building Your Life podcast.